Hey, oh, nope, my microphone's still not working. Haha. All right. Hey,
I hear you.
hey, hey, everybody. Happy Wine Wednesday. Sorry for the delay. Lovely volleyball games that, chitlins need picked up and such. So, and then I had Google problems. What's new? We're here, we're happy, wine in hand. I've got Dan with me already to give us an update on the hurricane. Hey, Salty. I did put a link up, guys, but something's going on with connection. So if you have troubles, apologies. Do let me know, and I'll try to fix them. But I don't know what's going on. So happy Wine Wednesday, Merlot tonight. Dan, welcome. Would you like care to give us an update on what happened with the hurricane and everything? Ooh, Ray, mute YouTube. Sorry, everybody. Do let me know, and I'll try to fix them. But I don't know. Mute YouTube. Happy Wednesday, Merlot tonight. Dan, welcome. Somebody has to mute YouTube. Hurricane and everything. Okay. All right.
What's this?
Okay, Ray, you gotta mute YouTube.
I don't have YouTube on.
Okay. Something's going on here. I don't
There's
have
noise coming from somewhere.
I know, I don't have anything open. Let me see if I can fix it. I'm so sorry, guys. Oh, fun. Yeah.
Try muting Ray for just a moment and see if it goes away.
Unfortunately, I don't even. I can't even do that.
I don't have YouTube on. I have Facebook.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Mute Facebook, sir.
Okay.
That's what it is.
Okay. I don't have YouTube on.
You're coming in and out too, but we'll try to fix it. Just mute Facebook. Hey, this is the joy of trying to get a stream going, guys. Bear with us. So sorry. All right, you got it muted? I think he has it muted. I'm not hearing it anymore. So let's proceed. So sorry, Ray. If it starts acting up, I'll try to figure out how to mute you just for a sec. But hopefully we got it figured out. Dan, apologies again. Would you like to share with us an update on the hurricane and what's going on with all you?
Well, as far as I'm concerned with the hurricane for us, it was a whole lot of prep, a whole lot of hustle, basically for naught.
Oh, no.
Well, I mean, we had to go through it. I mean, we didn't know what we were going to get. If you sat there and watched the tracking, at one point it looked like we were going to get a Cat 5 on top of us and have catastrophic damage.
Right.
And, you have to prepare. You have to go with the assumption that that's what you're going to get. So, we spent a fair amount of money. We did all the prep. We got everything, 97% secure. I never completely finished because it got to the point where it was pretty evident we weren't going to get as much as, it could have been. And then eventually it got to the point where I would say I probably never saw tropical force winds, even though it got within 100 miles of us.
Really?
It was a pretty small storm, but I will say this, it leveled certain sections of the Bahamas up in the north end. Miles of us. And,
really?
It was a pretty small storm, but I'm hearing an echo.
I know. I don't know what is going on. Something keeps coming back in. Okay, go ahead.
One of my customers today had a friend who took a boat to the Bahamas trying to go over there and lend a hand and take some supplies with him. And it was very slow going because of all the debris in the water and the bodies in the water.
Bodies?
Yes. You got to realize that the average height over there above sea level is about 15 feet, and they had a 15 to 24 foot storm surge.
Oh, my.
And a lot of those homes were leveled. And, there was a lot of people that were washed out to sea.
That's so sad. That makes me feel terrible.
I was watching video footage of a second floor where the second floor was flooded and waves were crashing against the glass sliding door on the second floor porch. And listening to some of the help calls that came in, it was evident they were pleading for help. Nobody can help. You know, if you elect to stay in that type of a setting, you're on your own until the conditions change.
Oh,
And unfortunately, that storm sat on them. Essentially, it was the equivalency of about an F2, F3 tornado sitting on them for 36 hours or more.
I feel absolutely terrible for them, and yet extremely grateful that you didn't have these problems, that it didn't hit you. um, so were there projections just, I mean, is it just the bottom line that they can't make these projections properly? I mean, it's impossible.
Well, every storm they learn new things, and it's not that they weren't trying. It's not that we don't have technology, but the weather is the weather, and the hurricane itself is controlled by different currents, and the currents come from different directions. You have low level, mid level, high level, the height of the storm, the intensity of the storm, how strong these fronts are. All these things play a role in telling the hurricane what and where to go. And um, basically, the bottom fell out on the ability to steer the storm, and it just sat there waiting. And it slowly picked up. You know, the front's finally opened up a corridor for it to head north, and it's done so. And it'll constantly keep picking up steam until it finally races off to the north. But that'll be after it hits the Carolinas.
Oh, so we're still in trouble at this point? I mean, there's still people that need to beware?
Oh yes,
Okay.
absolutely. People along the South Carolina and North Carolina coast need to be paying very close attention. Those on the coast. Now, inland, this is a small storm, and because of that, it's not going to have the wind damage inland so much as the flooding from the pushing the water up the different waterways. And people along the coastline will have some bad winds, but that shouldn't be anything new to most of those people.
Right. I mean, I'm so glad it didn't hit you, but it's really cool the job that you did explaining how to get prepared, and what all did you actually have to go through to prepare? And I mean, did was it a huge mess trying to come back from it when nothing happened?
Well, not this time. This was nothing compared to previous storms that we prepared for because I've cut back the production.
Hmm.
So my back building was the only thing I had in the back building that I had to worry about was the Artemia. And, um, the number of systems I have running is about one third of what I had, a year ago. The As far as preparation for us, the big thing is getting the shutters up on all the windows, making sure the generators are running. We had to rebuild the carburetor on the generator to get it up and running properly, and then picking up all the stuff outside. I've got, I don't know, probably 20 or 30 tanks stacked up outside that
Hmm.
I had to rearrange, and then we double checked, made sure which trees with the wind direction, which way the trees were going to fall, and then we probably spent four to $600 on food to last us a couple of weeks if everything really came bad like it was showing at one time. Um, and then it was once we got most of that done, then the hard part was the waiting part, and it's like almost a day and a half, 2 days that we've all sat cooped up with you can't look out your windows because everything is shuttered up, and you're just waiting and waiting and waiting, and finally it just missed us. During the time that they said we were going to have the tropical force winds with hurricane gusts, I was sitting on the back porch, and my daughter and her boyfriend were cooking chicken on the grill on the front porch.
Well,
And then what the funny thing is that after it passed us, we got worse weather after it passed us because it enlarged. And when it was closest to us, we were getting nothing. And then after it passed us, it was mostly rain with a little bit of a wind, but not, I've had thunderstorms with stronger gusts than that.
well, I like I said, I'm going to be grateful, and I do want to say that I'm really sincerely glad and thankful that Macna. Everybody who went to Macna was safe and didn't run into any troubles. Now, I do know that even though I had trouble that had nothing to do with the storm getting on the plane to get there, because I was supposed to go do Macna and then help you too, I know that they messaged me to tell me that my flight home would have been canceled. So I'm curious, did the airports just have trouble in spite of the fact that it didn't hit, or I mean,
No, they have to go through certain preparations as well. And you got to remember, when you're talking about a multi-million-dollar asset such as a plane, they don't want to put them in harm's way.
sure.
Nor do they want to try to land with adverse conditions. So they some of the closings of the airports weren't because the conditions were so bad they couldn't do anything. It was because they were being proactive and
Gotcha.
preventing anything bad from happening. And safety has to be first with that.
Sure. I mean, yeah, I wouldn't have
The
wanted to get on a plane, and if there's any chance of problems.
the the airport in Marsh Harbor over in the Bahamas is still 6 feet underwater.
Oh my gosh. My heart goes out to those people. Oh my goodness. Were they, now you said that everything was leveled and such. Did they just not think it was going to come that way, or did they not, or there's just
No,
nothing they could do?
there's nothing you can do in that type of a force. I mean, you're
Oh,
talking 185 miles an hour winds sustained for a long period of time with gusts that went over 220 miles an hour.
it's just
And,
terrible.
even the concrete buildings over there, many of them collapsed. What happens is once you lose any integrity in the building, that wind starts getting a hold, and then it just rips the rest of it to shreds. You lose a roof or lose part of it, lose a couple of windows, anything like that. Now you've got all that wind inside and just kind of blows the place apart. And then the walls can't stand without having the rest of the, upper structure to hold it together.
That's just so scary. It's
And
terrifying.
if you look at the pictures, there's whole neighborhoods that there's no buildings left.
Oh my gosh. And will they, oh my, I mean, what do people even do in that city? Will they just start rebuilding now, or?
Well, the first is humanitarian aid, because
Right.
you've got people that are walking around in water with no shelter, no
Oh,
food, no water. You got to remember, this was all salt water. They're on an island,
mm,
um, and they have many injuries that they're still trying to airlift out with choppers. Um, and you can't just move everybody, because you're talking about I forget the exact number now, but there's thousands of people that live there in that area that got hit.
oh, jeez. My heart is okay. Do you know of any current efforts where anybody who sees this or thinks about it, could provide any sort of help that they could? Is there anything like that going on yet? Do you know?
There's all kinds of things going on.
Okay,
NEMA, which is part of the Bahamian Emergency Management Assistance Program, is already into full gear.
good.
The U.S. government, the Coast Guard is currently over there helping. The U.S. government's involved in helping. Red Cross is in full gear trying to mobilize and get stuff there. But, it's difficult because you can't just go, trouncing in there with a big boat because of all the debris and stuff in the water. And you have no real port to land it at the moment. The
Mm,
airports are shut down. So, it's a difficult situation.
gotcha. Yeah, interestingly enough, I did notice, for anyone watching, Dan actually told me about a really cute and not cute, very good channel. Is it The Vagabond? Am I saying it correctly?
La Vagabond,
Love
yes.
Vagabond, a very nice couple that shares their experience, literally sailing across, all over the world in a boat. And I did happen to see a post that they were doing well. Do you know if any other, in that situation, if a lot of people got in trouble in their ships and such?
I haven't heard of any cruisers as of yet.
Good.
They were further south. The Bahamas stretch all the way down almost to the Turks and Caicos. So, the area that got hit was the very northern end of the Bahamas. The rest of the Bahamas are fine.
Okay.
And they were already south, and they were moving further south. So they missed, I'm sure they had a little bit of worry as that thing was coming in,
Sure.
but, it really didn't affect them.
Gotcha. Well, I'm curious to anyone watching, what did you do during the hurricane or the pot, what did you have going on as you prepared, and what was your relief as you realized it was or wasn't going to cause you troubles? And, share in the comments, please let me know how it affected you. And, yeah, guys, what else? Dan, go ahead. Were you going to say something?
Yeah, we have Curtis Smith that's in the chat section that is local that also went through what we did.
Okay. Oh, I see. Oh, and Curtis, yeah, I'm just now seeing the comments. Sorry, guys, but yes, Curtis, what was your experience? Please do share. And let's see. I'm just trying to read the comments, catch up with you now. Um, Anything else that we need to mention about that?
No, it's just anybody in the I suspect anybody in the Carolinas is already aware.
Yeah.
Hopefully they are, because if not, it's going to be almost too late to prepare.
Oh, geez. I mean, but they had enough warning to prepare, right? I mean,
Yeah,
just
I mean, it's been
okay.
projected to go up that way for quite some time, and it's like with us, it's gone back and forth on the exact path. And the difference of a few miles, you think about it for a minute, that thing was within 100 miles of hitting our house.
Mm.
It was a very, very small storm. The eye wall was only about 10 miles when it was at its peak in diameter. And if you got away from the eye wall just a few miles, the winds dropped drastically.
So, I mean, is that typically how it works, or is it because it was a small storm? I mean, I can't
Because
believe
it
it was so
was
close to you and didn't.
right, because it was a tiny storm but wound up tight. If
Mm.
that had been Irma going the same path as this storm did, we would have been clobbered.
Right, because I mean, I was really afraid, up until the very moment because they projected so much bad for your area. So I'm just very grateful that everything did turn out well. And I asked Lucy last week, and I don't think she heard me. I'm just curious. And this might be silly, but do the seahorses have any sort of react? Like, how a dog starts to get antsy if a storm's coming? Do the seahorses act any differently? I'm just curious.
Well, from my perspective, what we normally see is increased breeding during just before a storm as the
Really?
pressure drops.
Huh.
Most of the animals in the animal kingdom do sense something is about to happen. It's almost eerie the day before or hours before a storm hits. There's no birds. If you
Yeah.
look around and you don't realize it until somebody points it out, then it's like, the first thing I noticed this afternoon when I was out front was the birds are back. Um,
It's so interesting. What a
you
way to
know,
track it. But that'd be great.
but there's little subtle signs in nature that something is about to occur, and I suspect they feel the pressure drop.
And is that equivalent to some? I'm trying to think. Like, I know that they're in the wild. Their breeding seasons are very affected by the climate and temperature and seasons and blah blah blah. So is that something normal? The pressure drop. I'm sorry. Is that an indicator of them of something? The season, its breeding season or whatever.
No, I think it's nature's programming for protection of the
Oh,
species.
I gotcha. Well, that makes more sense even. Very good. Very cool. And Ray's saying in the comments, sorry, Ray, I don't know what was going on. Like I said, I'm having Gmail troubles or something. But Ray said he would trade his winters for not having hurricanes or tornadoes any day. I'll have to agree. I live in Indiana. The weather sucks. It's up, down, all around. But, we do get tornadoes, but not like other places. And we're pretty darn fortunate to not have to deal with this stuff all the time. And my heart goes out to anybody who was affected. Even if you weren't hit, you're affected by it. All of the
Well,
preparation. Mm-mm.
I lived in New England for 14 years. I shoveled snow. I also got whacked by two storms up there, including Hurricane Bob, which was a Cat 2.
Mm. Yeah. I mean, you guys should
So,
you guys should hear him going through his list. He has a list of hurricanes he's been through. It's pretty amazing, really. But and so grateful that nothing ever has become of it. But Which was the worst one as far as damage for your, for your person?
For me,
Yes.
that would have been Hugo in 1989 in Charleston. That
And
was a Cat 4.
was it just that you didn't prepare well enough, or?
Yes, that was well, a couple things. Number one, Charleston is, the nickname is a low country, and the city of Charleston itself is below sea level, much like part of New Orleans. And um, nobody had generators. None of the stores or anybody around had anything. There was mass flooding issues for certain areas, not where my house was. Um, there was tremendous amount of damage, and immediately after the storm, you were struck by how much damage there was and things that you would never. I mean, there was no such thing as a street sign or a billboard after the storm.
Hmm.
Um, Many of the traffic lights were blown off, and when you drove down the road, as you dodged the trees and telephone poles laying on the road, it was easy to get lost because your normal subconscious landmarks were all gone. The whole topography of the area had changed. And what struck me the most was 3 days after the storm, how many people were hungry or didn't have the supplies. There was no gas, there was no water, there was no electricity. Everything had been turned off. And, you know, it was hot, it was humid. At night, it was pitch black dark. And
Hmm.
somewhere in the distance, you'd hear the lone generator running. Um, and we had rain about 3 or 4 days after it hit, and the whole neighborhood was outside ripping their downspouts off their gutters, standing underneath the the gutters, taking a shower in their bathing suit.
Wow. I mean,
It just
you lost me as soon as you started talking about the landmarks being gone. I can't. That sounds like like a Walking Dead type movie. You wake up and everything's different. Oh my gosh, that would be so
well, you don't
scary.
just wake up.
I
You
mean,
don't
I
just
know,
wake up
but
because you're exhausted from hearing that freight train trying to go through
oh,
your house, and you swear the house is going to come apart. It just, it's when you get to Cat 4, Cat 5, those cause catastrophic damage even to
right.
well-built places. So, and then the worst part of any storm that I've ever been in, except for one, was the aftermath. And you got cleanup, you've got damage to assess. Trying to get life back to normal can take up to 2 or 3 weeks, um, just to get all the services restored and places opened again.
Oh my gosh.
And in Charleston, it was quite evident when you looked around, you could see where trees were snapped off at 15 or 20 feet, and it looked like a lawnmower had come through from all the different embedded tornadoes.
That's crazy.
And that was the worst. The easiest one I had was at sea.
Really? Now, why
Yep.
why do you say? Actually, I wanted to comment, Lucy. I'm very curious to know why. Lucy's comment was that she would rather have the hurricanes versus the snow. So I'm curious to hear more about that opinion. But why was your experience at sea the easiest? That's interesting.
Well, leading up to it, I I needed no laxatives. When it finally hit,
Go ahead.
when it finally hit, we realized what we had to deal with, and we dealt with it. I was on a 127-foot boat, and we had, I don't know, probably 24 hours of storm conditions, and that boat felt like a little bitty rowboat in a big sea.
Oh,
But once it was done, the weather was calm, the seas were flat, the sun was shining, and there was no cleanup. There
I
was no
mean,
aftermath.
that's the truth.
So so it was hang on for a period of time, and then it was done, and that was the easiest. Um, what was it I read here? Curtis Andrew was actually worse than um, Hugo was in Charleston. Um, Hugo was a Cat 4, Andrew was a Cat 5, and it doesn't seem like there's a big difference between, people think about the wind speeds not being a big difference, but a difference of 20 miles an hour or 15 miles an hour is dramatically different at those speeds.
Ray, what's the worst nature caused experience you've lived through?
That winter blast that had 77, 78, second winter in the coast there, and the snow completely obliterated all the cars. You couldn't tell where a car was. There wasn't any humps that would reveal where the cars were. So when they brought in the military and started going through and trying to clear out the roads, they had guys snowshoeing using
Oh,
gas station dipsticks to probe for the cars.
oh my gosh, I can't even imagine. I can't even imagine. That's so. I mean, go ahead, Dan.
A hurricane is not the worst natural disaster I've been through.
What would you say the worst is?
The earthquake in Italy in 1980,
Mm.
um, that leveled whole towns, and there was thousands of people that died in that thing.
I've actually asked you on a personal level, but just in case anybody else has the same curiosities that I do, how exactly does a hurricane, cause so much I'm sorry, an earthquake cause so much damage? Like I got it once you explained it, but do you want to explain it again?
It's that hard shake. I mean, it starts at the foundation, and most buildings aren't designed to be shaken like that. In Italy, they're the way a lot of those places are built, it's different than here with concrete block. A lot of those places are like a plaster type mud building. They're not flexible.
Right.
So once they start, get shooken, they're trying to flex, and they don't flex, they break. And there's tremendous amount of rock and plaster and concrete and all kinds of stuff that just tumbles in.
Well, I can certainly imagine like just the base. I can't think of the right word at this moment, but the foundation. When the foundation is, I totally get it. But how do some buildings and some people, escape the same wrath as the buildings that collapse? Is it just the way they're built, or the place that it hit? The earth shakes, or what?
Well, sometimes it's the luck of the draw.
Mm.
You happen to be at the right place at the right time, or the wrong place at the wrong time. Some buildings survive this and don't survive that. A great example was in Hugo. I had a shed in my backyard that I made, had T111 siding and a tin roof. My neighbor was in the back corner, and the opposite of me, my neighbor had a shed. And after Hugo passed, my shed was still there with a tin roof on it. His shed was wrapped up into a ball 2 blocks down the road.
Jeez, I know.
They were 20 feet apart.
I mean, I can't even imagine. That's so. That's. Whew. My hats off to all of you folks who've lived through these experiences. There's a couple of comments about how, the hurricanes are kind of in and out, but I've watched you guys worried and preparing for this for so long. It's just a lot to deal with, and especially when there's seasons. Like you guys go through this every year. It's just wow.
No, we don't go through it every year.
Oh.
We pay attention every year, but we don't get threatened every year. I grew up in Florida, and from 1960 to 1978, when I left here, there was no hurricanes that hit Fort Pierce. Now, Florida did get hit, but you got to remember, Florida has more coastline than any other state, and is more, it's a bigger target. And you can have a hurricane hit Miami and not affect us in Fort Pierce. Just like last year, I think, what was it? The one that hit the north coast of Florida, the name is escaping me at the moment, but that was Cat 4, borderline Cat 5 storm that went right through there.
Mm.
And that did massive damage in that area. But again, it was a relatively small storm.
Gotcha. Lucy responded in the comments. She said in 1999 in France, there was a big storm, and she was very intoxicated on the wine. Luckily, because it was so scary, and the wine helped a bit. Hopefully, thank goodness she's still here with us and didn't get, hurt because of that. But anyhow, she said she was living in Paris. She took the underground, but it was shut, and people were put out of the building. There was no taxis, no buses, everything closed. she saw parts of roofs, big branch trees, and various objects flying all around. I mean, that's terrifying. And there was nowhere to get shelter. Yeah, again, my hat is off to anybody who's lived through these things. And, you know, I really appreciate the fact that, you know, Dan, you and other folks help others in learning how to prepare and learning what they should prepare for before these events happen. Because that's.
Well, there's going to be an interesting story coming out of the Bahamas when they finally get to writing it up. There was a
Right.
storm chaser that went over there to go through the storm, and his account of it, I don't think he'll do that again.
I bet not. I bet not. I mean, he's lucky kind of to be alive at this point, right?
That's exactly what he says.
Yeah.
You know, it's unfathomable. When that storm hit, the way he described it, there was nothing you could see. All you could see was white and the constant pounding. You know, because you have, the scary part is that well, first of all, Lucy said something about you could hardly stand up. If you got true hurricane force winds, you can't stand up against it. And when you get to that level, you know, there's no way if you begin to lift any part up, the wind's going to catch hold of you. And then you're constantly worried about the debris. And in this case, they had the flooding. And not only do you have the flooding, but you've got debris in the water, which are things that can hurt you.
Sorry, I'm not laughing at your comment, Dan. I was laughing at Lucy's and Ray's little conversation. Yep. I'm curious to both of you who are with me now, or anybody in the comments. Wow, that comment just made me totally lose it. Okay, hang on one second. I was going to ask. I don't even know what it was. It's completely gone. I'm so sorry. Oh my gosh. Okay, I don't know. What else do you want to talk about? Because that totally left me. If you start talking, I'll think of it in a minute. But, geez, it's just gone. I'm so sorry.
Ask Curtis about his canister filter.
I'm sorry, what?
Ask Curtis about his canister filter.
Ask whom?
Curtis.
Curtis, I'm supposed to ask you about your canister filter. What? Tell me the story, Ray.
Well, I just saw he had posted there saying it looked like he said it wasn't getting flow. Having problems with it.
Okay, I'm trying to see what comment you're seeing.
I think it goes way back.
Oh, okay. Curtis,
because of the hurricane compensation.
Oh, I see. Yes, if anybody has any topics that they want to discuss, please feel free to ask questions. You know, I did want to catch up and find out what was going on with the hurricane, but yeah, ask Seahorse and reefing questions, absolutely. So 3-month-old filter, right? That's what I'm seeing. And if you want to jump in and show us what you mean, feel free to use the link or give us a little better description. What do you guys think's going on? What do you think's going on, Ray? Or do you?
One thing I can think with the little that we know here is he's probably got air that's getting trapped in it, and then the flow. Some are designed with the pump on the top,
Right.
And if the flow, or if it gets air trapped in there, then it'll sit there and pump air, nothing else.
Curtis, you can't have an airlock inside the unit without having air in the line. The second thing I would check is if the impeller is working. If you plug it in, the impeller is spinning, then somewhere we have a blockage if there's no airlock.
And yes, I'd love to give my 2 cents, but I'm a visual person, so I gotta see what we're talking about, or, you know, but these guys are giving great tips for you. I've never had luck with the canister filters, so.
So, Curtis, you said the yes check this morning. Is that for the impeller? Yeah, I suspect you've got air trapped inside the unit around where the impeller is, and that's probably the issue. It's got to get a little bit of water for it to start. Once it starts, it'll pump that air out.
So the solution is to what now? I'm sorry, I'm trying to follow. You said it's to.
Well, what I would do is I don't know which filter he has, but
Right.
when I've used canisters in the past and had this issue, I would take it back apart and I would fill the canister full of water before I would put everything, back together, and then I would fill the lines with water, pouring water down the line until I had water coming out the other end, and then I would turn the unit on.
Oh,
Just
okay.
if it is a problem, though, usually if you can do it without doing any damage, pick up the canister filter and turn it on its side or even upside down if you can. That'll transfer the air to the opposite end, and it should start pumping again. Then you can gradually lower it back and let out a little bit of air at a time and get it going again without having to take it apart.
Hmm. Good plans.
Well, the last resort that I do is get a bigger hammer.
Right.
I don't like canister filters anyway.
Why not?
Well, when it comes to seahorses, there's, because they're not real easy to clean out, and I believe you shouldn't let them go more than 7 days without getting the stuff out of the filter material, because it's breaking down all the time it's in there and providing food and bedding for the bacteria. So being that I'm lazy, I know there's a lot of other people out there that are lazy. So you tend to, if you don't want to do it because it's a pain in the ass, then it gets let by, and then sooner or later your water quality degrades, and then you got seahorse trouble.
Sure. And he did. He
Another
did.
thing you can do is take a power head and flow water into the intake and get it going that way too.
Does everybody see the beautiful seahorse in Ray's background? The seahorse wanted to be part of the show. She's back there dancing, or he. I'm sorry.
That's down to night lighting, and it'll be going out in a little bit too.
Look
Green
how
lights.
look how active and happy though. That's awesome to see. I'm glad they're doing well. Hey, by the way, and if we have other responses for Curtis, please feel free, guys. But my question was, what's the update on your situation with the algae, Ray? Weren't you having trouble?
It's starting to build. It's been it was a week ago Tuesday, a week ago yesterday, and yesterday it started getting the algae built up. So by tomorrow, there'll be quite a bit there, and it just looks like coralline, but it isn't.
Hmm. Well, I did you ever
It is hard. It's harder to get off than your normal yellow or green or brown that grows on the glass. Um, I can the heaviest heavy duty magnets will get some of it, but it won't get it all. I have to razor blade it.
Wow. Definitely post a picture or something, maybe in Seahorse Source group or something. I'm just curious. Have you already posted a picture?
No,
Well, you should. I'm curious to see if we can figure it out. But
I'll wait and see if it. Maybe I'll skip the cleaning tomorrow and let it build up more and get a better picture.
yeah, well, don't hurt anything for that. But sure, Dan, were you going to say something?
No.
Oh, okay. All right. And I certainly didn't mean to pass up on. Is there anything else we can really help Curtis at all until we know more?
I think he's got to start. I think Ray's idea of turning the unit on its side is probably a good idea to see if that helps.
Okay.
Short of that, I'd have to look at the unit.
Gotcha.
And use a power head to push the water into the intake. Either method I've used in the past.
Gotcha. Well, good suggestions, guys. Anybody else in the comments got any things they want discussed or any topics or questions or such? Please give a shout out. If you guys did attend MACNA or anything, I would love to hear from you. I missed Lucy's awesome chocolate seahorses. I want to hear all about how great and delicious they were. Not that I needed it, but I really wanted it. So let me know. Um, Dan, anything else going on with you? Aside from the hurricane, like anything new on production or anything new with the seahorses? Any new thoughts or things you want to share?
No, not really. The last pretty much the last week has been all prep.
Sure.
At work, to give you an idea how busy we were, the place that I'm working at now is a feed and hardware store. And we've got a 1,000-gallon propane tank. And in two days, we went through 3,000 gallons, filling 4-gallon containers.
Wow.
And it was just, pump, 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 pump like crazy. And people were, down here, people were taking things seriously, and they were, hurrying up and trying to get everything all prepared and expecting the worst.
Man. I mean, I've seen that on, on the news and such where people were just lined up for stuff and just kind of go nuts. So,
well, it was interesting because normally when you have a storm like that that's approaching, especially one that's that serious, you have people are just crazy. Before the storm, they're ready to kill each other because they want to be first in line to get this before it runs out. And because of the delay, stores ran out of everything, but they were able to restock. So a lot of the things that people couldn't get immediately before the storm, because there was a couple of extra days involved, they were able to go get afterwards. But talking to the police, they were answering calls, fights at gas stations, or who was in line first for a pump and things like that. And the same people immediately after the storm will give you the shirt off their back to help you.
right.
But it's almost like two different people before and after. The beforehand, it's like the what is it, the Black Friday or Black Monday, whatever the heck it is.
Black Friday.
Black Friday after Thanksgiving, trying to get in the store to be first to get that handful of items before everybody else does. And then afterwards, it's just, the contrast is just mind-blowing to me.
Sure. Puts people in their most primitive, make it or break it, Darwin-y type, the best survive kind of attitude,
Yep. So for the last week, first of all, at work, at the beginning of the week, we had to, decide what we were going to bring in extra. We brought in, the boss got kind of upset with us because we brought in a couple hundred extra sandbags. We already had 1,000 on hand, and I put it up on Facebook Friday morning, and we were sold out by noon.
Wow.
We had 1,200 sandbags gone.
Well, I bet the boss wasn't mad anymore.
No, the store did well. We did more volume in 2 days than we do in, over a week. We had people coming in buying all kinds of, feed for their animals to have on hand in case it was bad. They couldn't get it afterwards. It was crazy. And, most of our customers that we dealt with were actually in good spirits. They were taking things seriously, but they took everything in stride. We ourselves didn't see the crap that was going other places. And because most people didn't realize that we had propane, the grill refill, their line was a mile long of cars, an hour and a half. We only had 2 or 3 people in line at a time, but it was nonstop. It was interesting to see how things progressed, and fortunately, most people took it seriously. Most people prepared, and a large percentage of us will leave things prepared until probably the second week of October.
Yeah. So do you think that there will be another situation this year?
Don't know. There's no way to predict. And if you look at the models every day, like I do, one day is showing something coming our way, and the next day it shows it dying. And it's the long range models can only take the data that's put into them. It can't predict what the weather's going to do. It takes all the data that we have up to this point that we can input into them. And then each model runs what they call ensembles, where they take variances of the data and try to come up with a scenario or different scenarios and then average them out to what's going to happen. And it's interesting that this storm, if you go back in time, long before it ever hit the Caribbean, it was predicted the predicted path held true all the way up to the Bahamas. But twice it was supposed to die. It was supposed to die once it got to the Caribbean or the Lesser Antilles, and then it was supposed to die after going past Puerto Rico. And instead, it got stronger at each of those steps.
So, I don't like things you can't predict and you don't know what's going to happen. That's scary to me. What were you going to say?
You can't predict them, long range, but you do get advanced warnings. So unlike a earthquake or a tornado, we have time to prepare. And not being prepared is your fault, not anything else.
Gotcha. Hey, I wanted to very quickly ask, Sir Salty has joined us, and I saw in the comments that he's actually done. Salty, do you want to tell us what you're up to? Are you able to talk?
Yeah.
Okay. So you said in the comments that you moved the 125 to the new fish room because you have big plans for it, which is Seahorse plans, right?
Yes.
Okay, so tell me your plan. What are you working on at the moment?
Well, we're still in a little bit of construction left downstairs.
Mm-hmm.
We're building a bar and everything down there. But once it's done, the tank's going to be behind the bar, and it's going to be the backdrop, and I want to do Erectus.
Yay! It's going to be so cool. I can't wait to see it. So what, for anybody who happens to be watching that's getting ready to set up their first Seahorse tank maybe, obviously you're working with a 125, so you've got a bigger, you've got a lot of options that others with smaller tanks might not have. But what are the key things that you're making sure of, that you're adding? What is your basic checklist plan, equipment, whatever you want to share? Or are you still thinking about it?
I'm still in a debate about lights. I haven't quite figured that one out yet. I'm running 100-gallon sump for more water volume, just to keep water quality. And it's basically just going to be a macro tank.
Awesome. That is going to be so cool. I'm so excited. Oh, gosh.
Yeah. I've waited long enough. I'm ready again.
I'll tell you, my advice about lighting is never, fantastic for someone who does things, big, because I'm typically the person trying to find the, cheapest or easiest way to do something. And while I know that the expensive lights are typically better and do more and they have more options and can control more, I don't know. I just never have gotten that deep into them. But I'll tell you, Krista, who runs a fabulous she's my mentor in macroalgae, and she uses the AI Prime. I know on such a big tank that's not going to work, but I know you're debating, what are you between as far as lighting?
I had a DIY setup on my planted, when I did the freshwater planted thing for a month.
Right.
I thought about modifying that and just using that, and I'm between that or the Chinese black boxes.
Sure. Well, I'll tell you, I've used SB reef lights over a large, not as large as yours, but a large tank for macroalgae, and it worked well. I've used the DIY type stuff well, and it worked well. With macroalgae, you can't really go that wrong. I mean, you can do things to make it do better, but it's not that huge a concern. So whatever you decide, I'm sure it'll be great. But we'll be, if you do use your DIY, or even if you don't, feel free to come on sometime and maybe show us, what you did, how you did it, what you thought as you were making it. I love that kind of stuff, if you're ever willing. But okay, so what other equipment pieces, or actually a very good question, how many Seahorses do you plan to keep in it? You're talking about a 125-gallon tank, macroalgae, and a 100-gallon sump. How many are you thinking you're going to keep, and are you going to keep anything else in there?
I'm thinking I want to keep 5 pair.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't know if that's. I'm still looking into that, but and then probably just them.
There's no
I
wrong. There's no wrong answer. I'm just asking.
yeah. I don't know. I mean, I was in a debate about pipefish, but then uh, I don't know. And maybe I really want a copper band butterfly,
Mm.
Oh boy.
but I'm leaning against no on that one too.
Ray, what's your thought on the copper band?
I love them, and I've had one for I guess 18 years, and he sure could be a problem at times.
Mm. Like what? In anything in particular?
Well, every once in a while he'd get it into his head that he didn't like another fish, and it wasn't always the same other fish that he didn't like, and sometimes he was perfectly fine. But when he got aggressive, he got aggressive. He
Mm.
even was after my Achilles tang, and the Achilles tang was 4 times the size.
No kidding. See, the thing I always hear about the copper band butterflies is that finding one that's healthy and eating what you want it to eat is the most difficult part. But you're saying they could be bullies too? Oh my gosh.
I used to go to the grocery store and buy up saltwater clams that they would be selling there. They're live, and I'd bring them, throw them in a tank that had substrate in it, and just pull them out as I needed them and throw them in the tank for the butterflies, and they all loved them. I had one tank exclusively for butterflies, but the copper band wasn't in that one. He was in a reef tank.
Gotcha. Well, Salty, if you do decide to put them in, please let us, walk us. I know you're going to do your own channel too, but just update us now and then. Let us know how it's going, your experience with it. And is there anything, I didn't mean to cut you off. Is there anything else you wanted to share about where you're at in the process or?
I'm still early on.
Sure.
Like we just tore the tank down. I think it was it was last Wednesday we tore the tank down, and right now I'm working on the 75 gallons for the reef tank, just making it right again.
Sure.
Yeah, just construction phase right now.
Still so excited. Hey, Dan, I know my thoughts and etc., but what are your thoughts on the pipefish and on the 5 pairs?
Well, the 5 pairs I think is fine. My normal recommendation is 25 to 30 gallons per pair.
Mm-hmm.
So I think 5 pairs will go in the tank easily. I don't really like the idea of adding the pipefish. There's no true captive bred pipefish for the most part that's available in the U.S. And some pipefish are more aggressive at feeding than the seahorses.
Mm.
But I would probably not want to mix the pipes with the seahorses just because of the mixing with the signathid issue. If you're looking to put different species in the tank, I'd probably go with the Rectus reedi combination.
Mm-hmm.
Even though the reedi are largely unavailable at the moment, if you start off with the Rectus, you can add reedi later on, usually without a big problem. If you go with Cuda, Combs, or any of the other species, you're going to have more of an issue if you go to mix different species together. I like the idea of if I understood correctly, you're going to have a huge sump with that. I do like that idea. One of the nicest systems I saw was a guy's refugium was a 125 for his reef tanks. And he ended up getting seahorses and put them in that. And usually I say don't put a seahorse in a refugium, but that was a 125 that was his refugium.
Sure. And with the pipefish, the one thing that I've heard most often, just to expand on what Dan was saying, because I do know people who I mean, Lucy bred pipefish captively, captive bred pipefish, and I know a few others who do. If you could find and get those, that's a totally different situation. But just to expand on what he was saying, with signathids, when that mixing issue, he was talking about the different species, it's like more, what I've heard from most people is that it's more dangerous to put a seahorse and a captive bred seahorse and a wild caught pipefish in the same tank than it would be to like add a different fish because of the fact, as he stated, that they're both cygnathids. Something about their systems just don't work well together. The gut stuff, but captive bred's a different story. So definitely keep us updated on, what you do and how it goes, because everybody's experience is different, and I know you'll do well. So I'm very excited to see.
Have you figured out your flow rate yet?
Good question.
No, that was another thing I keep researching.
If you can break up the flow, the idea is to have as high of a turnover as you can without having a super strong jet of current going across the tank. One of my friends swears up and down he had a turnover rate of 40 turns per hour, but he did it by creating a network of PVC in the back of the tank behind the rock where the water was being evenly dispersed throughout.
I'm trying to picture that. Go ahead. Sorry.
Like the tank now has dual overflows and dual returns, and I thought about doing something like that, like drilling the back of the tank and adding like 2 or 3 more return lines so I can control each one individually.
I don't know if you have enough outlets on the water coming into the tank, if you have enough tees where you can spread it out pointing in different directions, you can, lessen the velocity of the water coming in the tank. You can go with much higher flow rate. I think that pretty much with the two overflows, if you have the typical Durso overflow, it should be able to handle what you're likely going to be able to do in that tank.
Now, are you suggesting that that's enough, Dan? Or?
Well, I don't know what the exact specs are for each of those overflows, but
sure.
I got to think that with 2 of them, that it's pretty high.
Yeah, when I was running it as a reef tank, I could do like 1,500 gallons an hour.
Yeah, I think you're going to be fine without having to drill the tank.
Now, the other thing I was thinking was take my return lines and actually like do a DIY spray bar to spread the flow out more.
Yep, that's the concept that the other guy that I was talking about did. Is he created a network of PVC that had different holes drilled in it all, throughout the back of the tank. And I never saw a picture of exactly how he did it. I just heard his verbal description of it. And Ray, you know who I'm talking about, Kevin Frenzel.
I know who you're talking about. I don't know if Ray heard you, but I know who you're talking about. I've actually.
I don't know.
Sorry, Ray.
Who's Kevin?
Yeah, Kevin from Seahorse.org.
Oh yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And I actually did something like that on a very much smaller scale, but it's kind of cool and fun for sure. I'll be curious to know what you decide. And that I know we're talking turnover, but are you gonna go ahead, Dan?
Seahorses can handle more flow than they're given credit for.
That's what I was gonna. I actually, in addition to making sure that the return lines and the actual turnover is what it's supposed to be for the tank size, regardless of seahorses or not. Then I also typically add, like, I've got the gyri, however you say it, in the 90. I've got 2 power heads in the 65, and my seahorses love it. They swim into the flow, that kind of thing. I know you were discussing turnover, but I'm just saying, like, they can handle a lot more flow than people realize. So
yep.
Yeah.
So Salty, have you decided what pump you want to start with?
As far as return pump?
Yeah.
It's going to be the Jabo. It's like the DC 12,000.
Good.
Nice.
Yeah, good choice.
So you got the nice thing with that is you have adjustability. So if it is too much, you can turn it way down.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and I use a smaller version of that, and it's amazing because you can turn it off for certain things, 10-minute feed thing. I love that. I love it.
There's a lot of people that knock the Jabos, but I have roughly, I think, a half dozen of them running, and I've been running them for about a year and a half, and I haven't had. Some of them are the older versions, but I haven't had issues with any of them.
I'll say it depends on where you get them. My first Jabeo project was really bad, but the place that I got it was not smart. I went cheap and bought from someone I shouldn't have. Anyone who knows me probably knows this story. But anyhow, everything that I've bought and used since then has done, a great job. I haven't had any. The only problems I have is if I don't take care of it. Do you know what I mean? Like I don't clean it, or I don't, let it sit and get algae on it, or whatever. Don't replace things in time. Then that's on me, not the equipment. So, Dan, do you have to replace anything on your Jabeo products very often, or never?
To this date, I have not.
Wow.
I do no maintenance on the pumps other than let them run continuously. And occasionally when I get a power outage, I'll have some pumps that I'll have to pull apart and, clean the impeller and stuff and put them back in, and they'll fire up. But as a rule, I really don't do anything with the pumps or the skimmers until they stop working.
Gotcha. Well, that just goes to show, folks, again, that, if you're running a really clean tank, obviously he's a breeder and his tanks are, he's not trying to grow coral or algae or anything like that. But bottom line is when you have things clean and organics low and something maintenance-wise trapping any particles and such, you don't run into the same problems. I have a lot of issues on the tank where I have the algae scrubber, to be honest. I just have trouble with the pump. I have to clean it a lot because of the scrubber and little bits and such. Ray, do you ever run into that? Like on the tanks with your scrubber, or on the tanks that have algae, do you have to clean your pumps often?
No.
Well, I guess I just suck then. But anyhow.
You mean clean them internally or externally?
Both. I have
power heads that I clean externally.
Okay. But you don't ever soak them in vinegar or take them apart, soak them in peroxide, whatever? You don't do that?
I use them for the reef tanks, but I've never needed to with the Seahorse tanks because I don't dose the calcium like I did with the reef tanks.
Huh.
Dosing the calcium in the reef tanks, that's what contributed to the calcium buildup in the pumps and the power heads.
Gotcha. Well, just to let you know, Salty, if you're doing macroalgae in the tank, you might have to go with what I'm saying because it just, little bits and pieces add up. Unless you're, very, very, very good with maintenance and keeping up. I just clean them because it's better than having to replace them, Obviously, in other circumstances, people don't have to, but I just have to because I've lost a few because I couldn't fix it once it was broke. Do you know what I mean? So, I don't know. Just chatting about it, different experiences, What were you going to say, Salty?
Yeah, I'd take mine out and clean it every 3 months.
Yeah. Well, with the macros, I just personally think it's a better, safer bet, But do you have any idea which macros you're going to put in? Are you going like for the natural Caulerpa type stuff? Or are you going for the pretty exotic, scroll and grape and all that stuff?
I mean, with it being like the backdrop to the bar, I kind of want like display type, pretty.
Cool.
To look good.
That's my favorite, and people really like the Caulerpas and different natural long macros like that, especially because they help a little bit more with filtration. But you're so on top of it with filtration, in general, that the macros will, as you said, be a display pretty thing versus actually going after nutrients. So go ahead, Dan.
What are you going to do for a background on your tank?
It's painted black.
You going to stay with that?
I don't know yet.
Go ahead, tell him.
No, it's personal choice. I mean, it depends upon the overall effect you want. But in terms of getting the seahorses to color up, if you were to scrape that and redo it with a medium tone blue, you'd probably have a better chance of getting the seahorses to color up.
Yeah, that's something I've actually tested on my own, and it's true. He's right. You put a blue background on the tank, the seahorses, like if you're going for a yellow colored seahorse or whatever, That's a big part of it. That blue and the, lighting makes a huge difference. And when you're looking at the lighting for the macros, for some reason, I know people have disagreed with me about this in different circumstances, but I had a male seahorse. I don't want to say, I will say, he aborted his babies when I changed lighting, and I believe the reason was that the lighting was too strong. There's a chance that he just was having troubles. There's a chance of everything under the sun. But based on my opinion, because I know what the way things happened, I think that the lighting was the cause, and it was just changed the environment or something. It was too bright. He didn't like it, and he stressed and aborted his babies. So
Entirely possible, but I'll tell you this: is they will acclimate themselves to whatever lighting you put in play.
I mean, I know you're correct. I just am saying that in that case, maybe I did it too quickly. Maybe, I mean, literally, I think it might have even been putting off heat, possibly. I don't know for sure, but all I know is I changed the light, and that day he lost, his. Go ahead and tell me, what do you think happened in that scenario? Sorry, Salty, we'll get back to you in just a second.
I don't know. I'm just saying that the seahorses will adapt to the lighting.
Mm-hmm.
There may be a short period of time where it does stress them if it's the highly intense or something, but ultimately they'll adapt.
Sure. And I certainly didn't mean to scare anybody. Seahorses won't usually freak out, as Dan has pointed out, just based on lighting. I think in my case it was just because I changed it so abruptly, and it was so bright in a different spectrum, different completely, and much stronger light. And he was just very pregnant. And this is my breeder that gave me most of my fry. So he never had another problem, never had one before that. It was just this one time. Could have been a fluke. Who knows? But just mentioning it. Anyhow, back to you, Salty. Sorry. What other thoughts or questions do you have? Or do you have any? I know you're still in construction and I keep putting you on the spot. I'm sorry.
Not really. I mean, the lighting was the biggest thing. And I think I'm going to go with the DIY. I just don't know what bulbs I'm going to use yet.
Gotcha. Well, and when you make your actual list of the macros that you're going to buy and put in, I can help you on the side more or on here more, because they really do, like I said, you can't really go wrong with macros. You can't do things so wrong that only a certain species will have that much trouble that they won't survive in certain lighting. Most of them will survive in any lighting, but you can make them look prettier, more colorful, and better by using lighting that caters to their species, where they're from in the ocean kind of thing. Or if they're, maricultured, then, or aquacultured, then, based on what the person selling them says kind of thing. But yeah, I'd be happy to help you once you get your macro list out. Have you decided, anything else? Are you using any old rock, or are you using any thoughts on that yet, or not yet?
I'm using all new rock.
Gotcha. Okay. It wasn't a trick question. I use old rock, but I make sure it's good. Anyways, Dan, any other thoughts that he might want to think about?
The only other question I'd have is on the substrate. I assume you're going with sand.
Yeah, I'm going with the Fiji pink sand.
Yep.
Is that good, Dan?
No, it's perfectly fine. I just make sure that people don't go with crushed coral or gravel.
Yeah, gotcha. And just to let anybody watching know, if you have questions, you can always come in here and ask. And on the Seahorse Source website, there's a very good listing on the articles page stating the basic parameters, and all of these things are covered. And of course, I have many articles if I ever get that website up. But Seahorse Source's group and page share these things constantly, so you can always go look them up there. Ray, anything else do you tell people to think about before they start a seahorse tank?
Well, I suggest I don't tell. I get in a lot of trouble anyway just on suggestions because people think I'm too severe.
Oh, you just love seahorses and you want people to do it right. You're all right.
Well, all I can do is go by my own personal experiences and from things that I've read from sources that I trust. And beyond that, if it's something that I haven't read much about and haven't experienced it, then it's pretty hard to advise on things like that.
Sure. I remember seeing a post the other day where people were saying that Tammy had stated some things or I had stated some things, and you had to correct the situation. And you were absolutely right. You were using the current information to help educate. So I took no offense, agreed with you, and said thank you, because a lot of times we'll say things and then a year later that changes, and if we don't remember to go back and update it, somebody could get the wrong information. So I think it's good. Somebody's going to jail. Who's going to jail?
I think they found out where I was hiding.
Uh-oh. Well, at least it's not an ambulance, right? They went away. You're safe. But yeah, I know Ray gives a lot of really great advice about feeding too. So, guys, Salty, anybody, if you have any questions, you know where to come and ask them, of course.
I think people overfeed their tanks.
Wait, now what? You're usually the one saying people don't feed enough. What are you talking about, Ray?
Well, I feed 4 times a day, but I feed less than many years ago when I fed fewer times, but more at a time. And now I don't have leftover food, basically, because first of all, I rinse the mysis in a fairly open mesh net, so the small pieces get washed out. And for the most part, it's only whole pieces that are left in to give to the seahorses. And so I feed an average of 4 grams to each tank at a time. I cut them up in theoretical 4-gram pieces, but I always get larger and smaller pieces. And then I have a set of scales that measures to hundredths of a gram.
Wow.
And I plop them on there, and all the ones 3.5 and under go for the barb tank, and the ones that are 3.5 over the 3.5 go to the abs tank. But still, that's feeding 12 seahorses.
Gotcha.
So 16 grams, 16 grams a day. But from what I'm seeing, I see people throwing in a cube, and I'm not sure how much the cube weighs, but just for a pair of seahorses at each feeding, and that's way too much.
Right. I hear you. The way I've always determined feeding, I think you're right. I don't think you have your tanks down to a science. The way I've always done it is literally by doing what my experience tells me to do, what I think that they should eat, the amount, and then determining if it's all gone. So I feed until it's not all gone. Until it's not all gone, right? And then I know that's too much, and then I back it up. And I usually do that during acclimation or quarantine period where I have them in a tank that's not all crazy, whatever. But, everybody does things differently. I wanted to say really quickly before we either get into this topic or go into anything else that, Salty, thank you for sharing. We can't wait to see when you get set up. Please keep us updated. I just wanted to really quickly thank you because I know you got the baby. Hope she's doing great too, but if you have to go, no worries. But if you have any other thoughts or questions, please pipe in and share. You're always welcome here. And Ray and Dan and Salty, the question that I remember was focused on in Seahorse Source Group was the brand. Do you think that it matters, the brand, and does that change the weight, how much you feed?
Well, I've always used Hikari and occasionally Yeah. What's the one from in Canada here?
Sure.
PE.
PE mysis.
I've used the PE, but I never was satisfied using the PE because there's too much of that enrichment washing off in the tank. So basically, I use the Hikari mysis, plus I supplement that with the um, homegrown Artemia. I grow them out to adult
Sure.
and then gut load them.
Sure. Gotcha. Dan, any thoughts on brand, or do you think there's...
As far as the amount fed brand, no, I feed based upon what the seahorses eat.
Right. Gotcha. Do you have a preferred brand?
I prefer Hikari as a rule because it's cleaner.
As you were saying.
But you know, there is an argument that PE helps with breeding and conditioning the seahorses.
Yes, I mean, we all know Colby is now Team PE Mysis, so, you know, I know they're doing something good over there. But I like Hikari too. I like both. So I was just curious what you guys took out of that.
PE that you think achieves that result, Dan?
Well, the problem we have is that when you try to analyze the difference between the two, one's using dry weight, one's using wet weight, and a lot of people get caught up in thinking one's better than the other because of that. The reality is the overall numbers of protein, fats, and what have you are very close. What we don't know is precisely which fats each of them have. When I contacted PE Mysis and asked them for a breakdown, they were happy to give that to me, but Hikari, on the other hand, would not give that information.
Yeah.
So
Interesting.
You're unable to compare to know how much of each of the components, DHA, EPA, etc., that each of them have. Now, Colby has had some independent testing done, and the PE comes in very, very, very good. And we know from historically people that use PE to condition broodstock, the results are good. But as a regular rule for average feeding, I don't like using PE. And my problem is not the PE mysis per se. It has more to do with the distribution channels. I just don't get it in good shape.
Yeah, that's a big problem is the shipping. I saw Chimp the Reefer. Hey, so glad to see you made it to a Wine Wednesday. Feel free to jump in if you want, or, you know, just glad you're here. And he made the comment, I don't have seahorses, but I'm definitely guilty of overfeeding, LOL. And the thing is, my daughter told me I could never say LOL again, and I just did. Uh-oh. Anyhow, agreed, but you have to understand that in a reef tank, you're typically looking at coral and other things that will actually eat anything left over, and it's good for the tank, and you know you're doing different things in the tank. With seahorses, it's not good to have leftovers. I saw a post the other day about, you know, is it okay for my seahorse to eat food that might have been, you know, under a rock or something and sat there for a few days, and that's really, really bad. Once it's bad, it's bad. And so, you know, we typically don't have coral that will, or, you know, other little fish that will eat it up. So in a reef, overfeeding is a different topic, you know, but I hear you. And it's an adjustment to, if you're keeping both, it's an adjustment to remember that you can do certain things in one tank that you just can't, you won't get away with as well in another. And of course, Dan, do you think that maintenance has a lot to do with it? Like, I don't know, if somebody, like, for, you know, in either of your cases where you're capable of overstocking tanks because you know how to handle it and such, we don't want to advertise that, but I'm just saying, if someone is maybe overfeeding a bit, does really high quality maintenance and equipment make up for it in some cases or not?
Well, yeah, I mean, it just requires more maintenance, better filtration.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's a matter of the more you can remove mechanically, the less you have to worry about biologically. And you have to remember that most people think, well, my biological filter is good enough. But in order for food that's not eaten or organics in the tank to disappear, before the biological can affect it, something has to eat it and convert it. So that means if you have high organics, you have higher counts of microbial activity with both bacteria and protozoans.
Gotcha. Now you mentioned convert it, and I get it, but let me ask you this, because I was thinking of saying to Salty that in a macro tank, it's a little different too, because the thing is, like in my macro tanks, I try not to overfeed seahorses, period, but if you've got snails and such that are going to eat them up, eat up anything left. We've had lots of discussions about that means the organics are still in the tank, right? Everybody knows that. But if it's eaten and pooped and turned, converted in different which ways, then it becomes a food for the macros. So any thoughts on that, Dan or Ray?
Well, the macros go back to the biological. They don't do anything for the pure organics.
Okay.
So, you still have to have something converted for the macros to be able to utilize it.
Would that be like what are you saying, like skimmer?
Well, whether it's the seahorses, whether it's the snails or other cleanup crew, or whether it's bacteria and protozoans.
Oh, okay. I do
They all
also.
have their own waste.
What, Ray?
They all have their own waste, and they're putting it back into that tank after they're done.
True, but question, in that case, if you were adding bacteria to the tank, that's just my method, nobody else has to use it, or, probiotics, that kind of things, then is it then converting it into macro food?
Yes. Basically, you have to remember that the basic chain of events is that the protein content is what's going to dictate the ammonia levels. Protein ultimately converts to ammonia through the digestive process of whatever eats it.
Okay.
Some of your other stuff is going to be converted over to phosphates and what have you. But the plants can't just take a piece of myces and absorb it. It has to be broken down and converted.
Right. Truth. That is true. But yeah. Okay. I was just kind of curious if it changed things. Just curious.
Well, the macros are helpful. Don't get me wrong, and I think they ultimately lead to cleaner water because they consume a lot of different things.
Mm-hmm.
But from a pure organic standpoint, you still want to, you don't want to overfeed to the point where there's leftover food.
Gotcha. I have one more question about that, Dan, because I get asked this a lot, or Ray. I get asked this a lot, and I know what's worked for me, but I guess I've never really stuck to a process, so it's hard for me to sit down and write down, A, B, C, D. So my question is, if someone wants to build a Seahorse macro tank, would you then advise them to wait to add algae until like all cycling is complete, everything's established, then add macros, or to use macros as a helper in the cycling and such? It does help, but it also kind of messes up the process. So I'm just curious what your thoughts are.
I personally would cycle the tank first, then add the macros.
Okay.
And I would probably do some dosing of ammonia if I wasn't adding food in there along the way.
Absolutely. Yeah, cycling's a whole big different topic. I just meant it kind of in general. Yeah, absolutely. That's what I say too. So I just was curious if you agreed.
Maybe I'd rather leave the macro until after I've established the seahorses and made sure that I'm not having any problems.
Right.
Then do the macro.
And Ray, I'm sorry.
Getting macro here in Canada is pretty hard.
I was talking to, who was I talking to? Oh yeah, Seahorse Canada. And I was talking to a couple of other people too that we're trying to make that a change in that, Ray. Trying to. But with your scrubber also, I'm curious, do you guys advise waiting on hooking up the scrubber until same deal, same difference, until we're established and raring to go? Cycle it properly with ammonia. Don't use algae at all, even the scrubber sense, until you're in a maintenance position.
I can't see that it matters because if you don't have anything there to feed it, it's just not going to do anything. If it has something there, then having it there should do some good.
Well, the complaint that people have, or the thought that it's bad, comes from that it'll uptake ammonia too, and kind of stall the cycling process or whatever. Make it not cycle completely correctly the first time, kind of thing. Go ahead, Dan.
Well, technically, it's not going to stall the cycling process.
Okay.
In theory, what they're trying to say is that it's absorbing, so the tank can't handle the same bioload.
Right.
The reality is that it can handle the same bioload because the scrubber is handling part of the bioload.
Right, as long as you
So
keep the scrubber online. Right?
right,
Okay.
but the rest of the stuff is going to mature too.
Sure. I'm just, throwing out questions, get explanations, so if anybody's liking it.
Now myself, I would cycle the tank before I added the scrubber.
Sure.
And after you've cycled the tank, then you should have some nitrates and stuff for the scrubber to have.
Right. Your point was valid too, Ray, that it's not going to do well at first anyways because it's not going to be eating anything. I've just seen even reef keepers struggle with, whether or not to wait in adding that. And I agree with both of your opinions. So any other questions that I've missed? Anything else you guys want to chat about? I was going to try to make this one a little shorter and I'm already failing. So anything else, guys? Anything in the comments, questions? Thanks again for coming, Salty. What? Who was talking?
No, I haven't seen anything for a while.
Okay. Well, sometimes, we get on a roar or on a roll. I just want to thank again Salty for coming in and sharing his experience. Dan and Ray also. Okay. Jeff Morrison said, dwarf seahorse, please. Can you be a little bit more specific with your question? We'd be happy to talk about anything you want, but there is a video also that Lucy helped me make about dwarf seahorse care. But if you have a specific question, throw it at me real quick, because I don't know what to even ask you guys to talk about dwarf seahorses. I'm not really sure. And
I had a question.
Go ahead.
Okay, during setup, I've read like a lot of people recommend while you're setting up your seahorse tank, you might as well set up a fry system too.
Well, that depends. Are you planning on raising fry?
I'd like to try.
Then I would probably consider how you want to attempt that in the initial phase, and I'd probably have my tank set up first before I'd worry about the fry system. But once you get seahorses, if they're sexable, they're capable of producing. So the gestation period is 2 weeks. So conceivably, you could order seahorses, put them in the tank, and 2 weeks later have fry. Realistically, it usually takes longer than that, but sometimes they come quick.
It's basically like seahorses that you order that are at that perfect stage for purchase. Are like little teenagers in a Chevy kind of thing. Dan said that before, but in a better way. Anyhow, yeah, Salty, I would definitely, if you want to breed and you want to try your hand at rearing and raising fry, then absolutely get it set up first. And if we want to talk about that, we could do a whole nother show on that if you want. Cheryl shared quite a bit about her tubs and setting up and getting feeds set up properly, but I can always have them come back for sure. Dan, what were you going to say?
I also have a couple of long videos on it, the talks that I've done at MBI.
Apologies. Yes, absolutely. On Seahorse Sources page and in Seahorse Sources group. I was privy. I was actually there for one of the talks, and it's excellent. And he's done a few more. Didn't you do one for Lisa or someone? You went somewhere else.
Well, I've done several locally, but
sure.
I had one of them that I taped, but it was on setting up a seahorse tank.
Oh, okay. Well, just goes to show, folks, anybody watching that wants information on setting up the seahorse tank or breeding, if you go to Seahorse Sources page, is it in the article section, Dan?
Yes.
Okay. And then if you click on the video, it looks like just a taped talk, and it is, but that's where you're going to get the best information. So he didn't go through all the frills and chills. It's really the information you want as you want it. Just watch it. And Jeff Morrison I'm sorry, Salty, did you have anything else? Were you still asking a question?
No,
okay.
that was it.
Okay. But yeah, we can discuss it more here too, of course, because tubs is like the answer. But I'll shut up and go into. Jeff Morrison said size tank flow filter.
Not over 5 gallons, unless you're going to have more than 50.
And do you disagree with that, Dan?
No, if I was to set up my own dwarf display, the way I would do it is I'd have a 5-gallon tank with a 20-gallon sump.
Okay, and I think when Lucy was able to talk, she mentioned that she would do. I can't even remember. I think she said 2 to 10 gallons. What's the
Right.
thought between these?
Lucy's doing a tremendous amount of water changes, and I rely more on filtration.
Okay, so a lot depends on whether you're going to rely on filtration or water changes. Can you say what if you did a 5-gallon tank with a 20-gallon sump? Can you just walk us through a very brief setup process? What you would put in it?
Sure. First of all, I'd have an overflow, which means I'd have to drill the tank, and I would probably bottom drill it like I do most of my other tanks. And I would use a 1-inch PVC pipe with a 2-inch piece of PVC sleeve over that with 760 micron netting. And then my drain to the sump would have a 100 micron bag to catch any artemia that passes through. So just to keep it from recirculating and junking up the sump. Then I would have some type of biological media down there so that my tank itself would be pretty much a bare bottom tank. And I would have a protein skimmer that was rated for, I'd probably use one of the SCA 303s in there, or 302s, whatever the heck the number is. Those are rated for pretty high volume. And then I would have some type of mechanical filtration for the water to pass through on the return back to the tank. And I can tell you that in my experience in keeping dwarfs, the protein skimmer pulls a tremendous, any tank that's being fed artemia is going to pull a tremendous amount of skimmate out of the tank. Keeping dwarf seahorses is just like keeping fry. It's like having a perpetual fry tank.
Yeah, and you know what? When we're done, I always say this, but I'm actually going to do it this time. I'm going to link to your page, and I'm going to put the video that we did, because I took a lot of your information too, and put it into the video discussing that it's like a fry tank. Ray, would you do anything differently? Anything that you could think of that you might want to say about a dwarf seahorse tank setup, flow, or anything?
Water change, the water change method, because to me, the cost of water change is minimal. So I would have, like, mine was a 5-gallon tank. Well, the primary one was a 5-gallon tank, open-ended air lines in it for circulation. I had a timer set up so that it would come on, I don't remember now, half an hour, 45 minutes, I think it was, after I fed the dwarfs. And at that point, the timer would come on and start sucking up. It was just a little mini filter, and it would suck up the uneaten dwarf or artemia. And I could clean that filter out, just pull it out and dip it in a bucket of water, stick it back in the tank, and it would be ready for the next feeding. And so any that were caught there, they weren't sitting there rotting away, but it meant that I was clearing out the tank before the next feeding of the artemia, so it was all freshly loaded with the algamac and spirulina.
Gotcha. I do know a lot of people use the 2-tank method too. It's love or hate, but based on that water change type theory, some people will literally move the seahorses to a new tank every week. That can, cause stress. So got to keep that in mind. Go ahead, Dan.
There's one more thing I would add to the equation, and that's a telescope.
A telescope. Oh, okay.
Yeah. so I can sit in my easy chair and be able to look at the damn things across the room.
They're awfully small. Most people will mention that, larger seahorses just tend to be more fun, kind of, because you can see them. We saw rays in the background earlier. They're big. You can see them. Dwarfs are really, really small, so you got to get up close to even see them. And they're not easier, so to speak. So watch the videos and ask any other questions you might have last minute here. Feel free. And hello, Nuri Fisher. We were talking about PE mysis just a little bit ago. You missed it. We will have to ask Nuri if he would like to come on and discuss PE mysis with us a little bit, and we can ask some of the questions we were discussing earlier. Would everybody like that? Yay!
Sure.
Okay. All right. So there's your invite. I'll message you though. Anyhow, now I got myself totally sidetracked. But yeah, dwarf seahorse tank. Ask any other questions you might have. The big thing is they need live foods, and they've covered the most base. But as far as flow, guys, we do need to say just very quickly that that's very different, because we were discussing earlier power heads and multiple returns, and in a dwarfed seahorse tank, you're talking about a tiny tank. And I mean, does anybody ever use any extensive flow in a dwarf tank? No, because it's like fry tank, right, Dan? Or no?
Right. The problem is if too high a flow, you flush out the food.
Oh, right.
So
there you go.
So typically what we do is during the daytime, we keep them loaded with Artemia, and at nighttime, we try to up the flow to whatever's comfortable with the smallest dwarfs that we have. And often there's fry mixed in with the adults.
Gotcha.
So it's difficult to have a lot of flow in a dwarf tank.
Sure. Yeah, and that feeding. That's the other part. Have you ever known anybody to do dwarfs in a tub situation other than breeders? I mean, does it make it easier? I know it's easier with fry from my own experiences, but you don't get to see them. So that would just be if you were trying to breed them, right?
Well, the problem is they're usually for display. So for most people, the tubs aren't ideal for that.
They need to make some see-through tubs, because it really is a better circumstance, right?
It is, but it's very expensive to make those. And there was a cooking show that had a huge acrylic, almost what I would consider perfect tank, but it was made for making a huge salad for some type of banquet or something like that.
Okay.
And I wish I knew where they got it from, because that would be really cool to have an acrylic tub where you could actually see through the walls.
Yeah, no kidding. Okay, well, guys, I don't see any other questions from Jeff. Let me know if you have anything else to discuss. And I'm really kind of excited about that idea. I think I am going to message them and see if either he or Colby would like to come on. So, guys, the more comments I see from you guys stating that you would very much like to see a guest come in and share their experiences and their advice and such and describe their food, the more likely I am to get them to come on. So let's see the comments. Comment. Go comment on the Seahorse Whisperer page. Feel free. All right. Anything else that we need to share, say, discuss, guys? I feel like I've kept you all night. Nothing, Ray?
No.
Okay. All right. Well, then I'm going to go ahead. The glass is empty. This is bad. So I'm going to...
Jeff wants to know best way to hatch the food.
Oh, geez, Jeff, you're killing me. All right. What's the best way to hatch the food? I'm just kidding. I love doing this and love getting your questions answered. So unless you guys want to pick it up next week, Dan, do you have a thought to answer that?
Well, it's not a simple answer, and I'll say this. If you want to be successful with dwarf seahorses and or fry, you need to study and understand Artemia. You need to know how to keep it clean. You need to know how to enrich it. And that's a whole, that I could do a multi-hour presentation on that in of itself. But you really need not to read what's online and what Joe Schmo does or how Sally does this or whatever. You really need to get the plankton culture manual or the the book from the FAO on live cultures and really understand Artemia, the pros, the cons, the enrichment process, the how to keep the bacterial counts down, and you will have much better success with whether it's with fry or dwarf seahorses.
To anyone watching, if you happen to see Tamara Marshall's talk at MACNA, I unfortunately missed it. If you have any highlights, I know it'll probably come out on BRS soon, but if you have any highlights or thoughts that she shared that you'd like to share, I would love to hear them. And one of the things that I was going to Florida for, in addition to, of course, MACNA, was to visit with Dan and do some of these videos. He didn't know that. He thought I was coming to help with the seahorses, and really I was going to make him do hour-long videos for you. So I didn't get to go to MACNA. I've got this flight sitting there that I got to use. So again, with the comments, the more you guys ask, the more likely I am to get them to do these things. I'll go to Florida and get you the answers, I promise. Comment, like. Okay, I'm done with my spiel. But yeah, not to put off your question, Jeff, but it is really detailed. I agree with Dan, and that's what he told me the second that I decided I wanted to even attempt breeding, was learn the feeds now. Learn the algae, learn the phytoplankton, learn all of it, and learn it well before you even try, because that's the key to all of it for sure. Enrichment too, of course. But I can try to set something up to talk about this further. Go ahead, Ray.
For dwarfs, do it before you get the dwarfs, because you might find out you don't want to do it.
Yeah, it is more work for certain. And I know that Alyssa has I think she currently has dwarfs for sale. So always check with the breeder or vendor. She might have a system set up that can make it easier. You know, someone who's working with them currently might have some up-to-date thoughts, tips, etc. Always check with, you know, the actual breeder or seller for that kind of information. But yeah, I'm going to have to agree with them. Dwarfs are just kind of hard. But if you really want to do it, I'll go to Florida and make him talk me through it, I promise. And anyways, okay, well, I am going to try to cut it again unless Jeff has another question. I'm just kidding, by the way. I really like taking your questions and want them always. So please don't ever neglect to ask a question. And if we do stop the stream and you have a question that didn't get answered or we missed or that you want discussed next week, all you got to do is message me, Seahorse Whisperer, or post to the page. You know, get some excitement going with this. Seahorses is such a niche topic that I often expand to look at other areas because I'm trying to, you know, get us more people in here to talk and share and help. But the more you guys comment and talk about how you want this to happen, the more I can get done. So please comment. And I'm going to try also, finally, Dan, I'm going to bug you right after we get off here for maybe some help getting links to those books that you talked about. So I'll try to post those when we're done. Anyhow, now that I'm done rambling, anybody got anything else? I'm doing a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right. Well, then I'm going to call it and say you guys will come back next week, talk more. Hopefully we'll have some PE talk soon. And I really appreciate everyone who comes and talks on these streams. And if you find it valuable, please let us know. Anything you want talked about, let us know. All right, guys, say goodbye.
Good night.
Goodbye.
All right.
Good night.
Thank you, Salty, so much for coming. Happy Wine Wednesday with the empty cup. Boo. All right. Cheers.